As a human being, I am prone to making mistakes. In this video, I'm going to give you 9 ways of how I incorporate this bug about myself into my quilting plan. I can't put these in any specific order because they're not linear. So basically, you'll just take any ideas that you like and put them into your own plan mistakes quilt.
Hello everyone, this is Shalina. Welcome to my channel, Quilt and Color, where I talk about all things related to art. Here you can follow me on my journey to becoming a full-time artist.
The first thing that I take into consideration is my mindset. I know for a fact that I will make mistakes in the quilting process. Somewhere along the way, I'll do something wrong. And now that I know this about myself, I just allow that and accept that. And this keeps me from having to berate myself about the mistake that I made. And so I can just move on to fixing it. Even though the instructions didn't plan for it, I know it's a normal part of making a quilt is making mistakes. Whether I sewed the wrong seam, or forgot to put right sides together, or cut the wrong size block, I just fix a mistake. I rip the seam and sew the blocks correctly. Another way that I plan for mistakes is doing the research ahead of time. I look at the website of the pattern designer or the book publisher to see if there have been any corrections that have been made to the pattern. And just like in cooking, I read all the directions, I find all my material and put that together. And if it's possible, I read all of the explanations of other people who have made this pattern to see if they have any other suggestions or tips or strategies on how to make this quilt better. Especially if it's a sew along, I like to wait a day or two after the pattern has been released because mistakes can be pointed out. But also, if I wait a week or two, there may be other people who have adapted this design and changed it, and I might like that change better than the original design. Number 3 is buying extra fabric. Whether it's my fault because I cut something wrong or the pattern designer's fault because they didn't estimate correctly, having extra fabric gives me that peace of mind that if I do make a mistake or if the pattern designer made a mistake, then there's fabric that's available to fix it. This is a reason why I like scrap quilts. It keeps me from having to buy extra fabric. I can substitute a similar color fabric or a similar value fabric, and it actually adds to the design instead of making me panic and having to go on a mad hunt for the fabric that I'm now low on. One way I make sure that I selected the right palette for my quilt is that I put it on the design wall or on the table, and I just leave it there for a day or two, maybe even a week, and I look at it. A selection of a group of fabrics that look wonderful when the sun is shining may not look as good when in the evening when you're looking at it under a light bulb. It may blend too much. It may not have the contrast that you're expecting, or it may look too drab. And also during this time period, your mood may change, and so you want to make sure that you're going to be satisfied with the quilt and all the time that it takes. After all the time that it takes to make it, you want to make sure that it's going to really fit what you like. I'm looking to make sure that the color palette is a good fit for my lifestyle. If I found it from the quilt designer or somewhere else online, it may not look as good in my house as it did in their house with their background. Number 5. If it's a pattern that has blocks, that is made from blocks, what I do is I wait until I am finished with all of the blocks before I put the blocks together. If, for example, you ran out of fabric and had to substitute, you can then incorporate the blocks throughout the whole quilt instead of just along the edges or wherever you hadn't sewn. So wait until the end after you've made all the blocks, and you can look at them and make sure that they still look the way you expected them to, that they have good balance, and that any mistakes can just look like they're a part of the design rather than a mistake. Also, I plan my time for this so that whatever time that I think it might take, I kind of double it, because I know that there will be steps in the process of a quilt that I'm making that are in the listed quilt pattern. There'll be extra steps I have to take, such as recutting something or unsewing something or resewing. There'll be time I had to take to figure out how to fix the mistake that I made. I plan ahead and give myself lots of time to get things done. in addition to the mistakes that I might make that will take up time. It's also other things that happen in my life that will also take up time. Things tend to take more time than you thought, and there's other things that crop up that you may not have considered, and you want to make sure that you have enough time to make the quilt that you want. By not waiting until the cousin is in labor before making the baby quilt, I can avoid mistakes. I'll have more time. Sometimes in a rush you make more mistakes, and if you give yourself enough time and plan for it, then you can know that you can make a simpler quilt for the baby, and then you can make a more difficult quilt when the baby is grown up and has a wedding. Also remember that deadlines are flexible. There have been many baby quilts that I haven't given to the recipient until they were 2 or 3 years old, and it's worked out completely fine. Actually, she appreciated it more after that, when she's old enough to appreciate it. Number 7 is quality inspection. I add in throughout the process many times when I do a quality inspection. When I'm sewing, I make sure I keep checking to make sure that the bobbin hasn't run out. Some people make test blocks. Instead of cutting for the entire quilt and sewing in assembly line process, you can just make one test block to make sure that everything looks the way it's supposed to, and then you can do the rest of the blocks in assembly line fashion the way you would. You sew the first block by itself, look at it carefully, measure it carefully to make sure it's going to fit into the quilt first, and then you can go ahead and just make the rest of the blocks. Whether it's your mistake or the pattern designer's mistake, you can catch it right up front. Lay out your quilt on the design wall or on the design floor to make sure that the quilt looks as you planned it to look, or if you like the way it looks now. Another way I save myself from quilting mistakes is to make a more casual quilt. Whether it's an improv quilt where things can be more flexible, or whether I'm using a fabric that's more casual like a denim quilt, it just allows myself to make more mistakes and let that incorporate them into becoming a part of the design instead of having something that is very precise and methodical. I still worry about the seam allowance and the integrity of the quilt, but the casual nature of denim quilts gives me that flexibility of making a mistake become a part of the character and the design of the quilt. Any imperfections are a character and not a flaw. Another way that I avoid mistakes is to take lots of in-process pictures. One of the great things about having a blog is that there are so many times I'll put a picture on a blog post and notice something that I had not noticed when looking at the blog itself. Sometimes you'll see a mistake in the photo that you didn't see in real life, and then you can fix it before you get too far along in the quilt. If you take a black and white photo, then you can see the contrast in the quilt and make sure that it is balanced the way you want it to be. If you post the photo online, other people may also be able to help you find the mistakes, although that presents its own list of challenges. We all make mistakes, and if we plan for that, if we allow ourselves that humanity, then quilting just becomes so much more pleasurable. I use this strategy in the improv portraits quilt that I made. The way I cut the fabric and the way I added them into the portraits, they were all part of the design and not mistakes. They added character to the characters. You can watch a video of my improv portraits quilt to see how I made it casual and let the way I cut the fabrics and the way I placed them be part of the character's character.